June 17, 1972. 1:47 a.m. The Watergate office complex, Washington, D.C. The city sleeps, but inside a nondescript office building on the banks of the Potomac, 5 men move through the darkness with surgical precision. Their target, the 6th-floor offices of the Democratic National Committee. Wiretaps, documents, photographs. They believe they are invisible. They believe the night will protect them. They are wrong. A security guard named Frank Wills notices a piece of tape covering a door latch, a small detail deliberately placed to keep a lock from clicking shut. He removes it. 20 minutes later, he finds it taped again. This time, he calls the police. Within minutes, 5 men are arrested inside the DNC offices, carrying cameras, bugging equipment, and sequential $100 bills that will soon trace back to a re-election committee for the President of the United States. At first, the story seems small, a third-rate burglary. The White House will call it. Reporters move on. Editors lose interest. But 2 young journalists at the Washington Post refuse to let it go. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein begin pulling at threads that others have ignored. Why does a burglar arrested at the DNC have the phone number of a White House consultant in his address book? Why does the money trail lead not to petty criminals, but to the Committee to Re-elect the President, an organization operating just blocks from the Oval Office? Every question answered creates 3 more, and every source they approach grows more careful, more afraid, more silent. It is in a dimly lit underground parking garage, months into their investigation, that Woodward begins meeting a source who will never let his name be spoken aloud. He signals for a meeting by moving a flower pot on his balcony. He speaks only in fragments, in warnings, in a phrase that will echo through American history: follow the money. He does not offer proof. He offers direction. Decades later, the world will learn his identity. Mark Felt, the associate director of the FBI, a man who watched the machinery of federal law enforcement being quietly turned aside and chose to become a ghost in the dark rather than stay silent. Inside the White House, the walls are closing in a different way. President Richard Nixon, a man who has clawed his way to the presidency through decades of political combat, now faces an enemy he cannot out-argue or outmaneuver: his own recorded voice. Few know that a secret taping system has captured nearly every conversation in the Oval Office. Fewer still understand, in these early months, that those tapes will become the very weapon that destroys him. Around him, the walls of loyalty begin to crack. White House counsel John Dean, once a trusted insider shielding the president from scrutiny, starts to understand the scale of what he has helped conceal. Fear turns to guilt. Guilt turns to testimony. In nationally televised Senate hearings, Dean speaks of a cancer growing on the presidency, and the phrase lands like a diagnosis the country cannot unhear. Then comes the detail that changes everything. In the summer of 1973, a White House aide named Alexander Butterfield reveals, almost in passing, that Nixon has been recording himself all along. The revelation transforms the entire investigation. Now it is no longer testimony against testimony, memory against memory. Now there is a machine that has captured the truth in the president's own voice, if only it can be forced into the light. Nixon refuses to release the tapes, citing executive privilege, national security, the sanctity of the presidency itself. Subpoenas are issued.
Lawyers argue in courtrooms. The case climbs, level by level, toward the Supreme Court of the United States, until 8 justices rule unanimously that even a president is not above the law. The tapes must be handed over. Among them is one recording that will become known as the smoking gun, a conversation from just 6 days after the break-in, in which Nixon can be heard directing his chief of staff to have the CIA obstruct the FBI's investigation. It is no longer suspicion. It is no longer a third-rate burglary. It is a president of the United States, on his own recording, orchestrating a cover-up from inside the Oval Office. Support collapses within his own party. Senior Republican senators, once his defenders, travel to the White House to tell him, without ceremony, that his support in Congress has vanished. On the evening of August 8, 1974, Richard Nixon appears before television cameras in the Oval Office, the same room where so much of this story was recorded in secret, and announces that he will resign the presidency of the United States, effective the following day. It is a moment without precedent in American history, the only time a sitting president has ever stepped down under the shadow of impeachment. The next morning, a helicopter lifts off from the White House lawn, carrying him away from the office he fought his entire life to hold. Weeks later, his successor, Gerald Ford, will grant him a full pardon, closing the door on criminal prosecution but opening a different, quieter question that will follow the country for decades. Whether power, once caught breaking the rules it swore to uphold, can ever truly be held accountable, or whether some men are simply allowed to walk away into the dark.